And on the QE3 matter, we were discussing how, following the continued deterioration in economic data, we expect the Fed to take action in the form of a twist in the central bank's portfolio towards longer maturity government bonds, the Danish bank writes. That is the FOMC, Danske Bank, I guess. Unless we see significant improvements in economic data over the next couple of months, we deem it likely the Fed will initiate QE3, buying more government bonds or mortgages. This could happen by the end of 2011 or early next year, and we don't even know the full implications of QE1 or QE2 quite yet, but we know it's got an inflationary pressure. We're going to have Lou Rockwell up in the next half hour, just in a few minutes from now. And beyond Ron Paul, we're going to get into the dollar, QE3, and the Federal Reserve really is the biggest issue in the room right now. Shifting gears, though, we also have a number of activists occupying Wall Street. I think they're in their fourth day. It may even be the fifth day now. I'm not 100%. We've got Madison Rupert. He's written, "No right to protest in America. Occupation of Wall Street thwarted thanks to ignorant police." Back in July, adbusters began promoting a move to occupy Wall Street in protest of the rampant corruption, market manipulation, and out-of-control greed that is destroying our nation today. Adbusters was hoping for a turnout of some 20,000 angry Americans who would occupy Wall Street for months. Unfortunately, the numbers were a 20th of that. But the real story here is how the police blocked off, didn't allow the protesters into the Wall Street area. They closed off the Federal Reserve Bank as well. We've got a report coming up from Danny Panzella, Truth Squad TV, one of the activists there in New York. He was the one who tried to occupy the New York Federal Reserve just a few weeks ago, all by himself even. And the police, because they had read about it on Facebook, showed up in force. There was at least 40 police or so surrounding the building. Now I haven't seen all the footage. I've seen some footage, but I would imagine quite a few more police blocking off that entire area. We're going to play a few minutes of that report. Luke Radowski, We Are Change, also down there, spoke with rapper Lupe Fiasco on Building 7 and on the Wall Street issues. He's got a hit single asking, did they really pull Building 7? We've got police block Occupy Wall Street protesters out of AFP, Agence France Press. Hundreds of people marched Saturday near Wall Street in New York, but the city thwarted their bid to descend into the heart of global finance itself to protest greed, corruption, and budget cuts. So you have a First Amendment right, supposedly, to appeal to government or so forth. But if you march down to the heart of the beast in Wall Street, they don't want to hear from you. The reason this is exciting, even though it's a lot of diverse groups, I don't agree necessarily with anyone's solution down there, but it's important that they're raising the questions and starting to appeal to the real power source, not even Washington, because government really is just a medium, a go-between for the power structure, for the power dynamics. And Wall Street right now and for some time has held most of that power, the power of our numbers of being regular people in this country and our power through the Constitution and Bill of Rights has been significantly dwindling and has been steadily going down with executive orders, overreach of the executive branch, and of course these drastic monetary reforms, if you can call them, a power handover. And so that's why it's interesting that adbusters who organized, I suppose, the biggest protest down on Wall Street, they say they plan to stay potentially for months. Many of them wanted to camp out. But as I mentioned, police have been blocking that off. But adbusters put on their website, "Dear patriots, rabble-rousers, revolutionaries, thousands will occupy Wall Street. We have our signs, banners, drums, etc. Then we'll get down to business and hold several people's assemblies to decide what our one demand will be." So they're trying to organize a massive protest to have only one demand. Shall we demand that President Obama reinstate Glass-Steagall Act, which prevents, financial houses from doing investment and speculation stuff on top of regular commercial standard activities? Very important law that they broke apart in the 90s, of course, under Clinton, but both sides have been involved. And really, Treasury Secretary Geithner, a protege of Robert Rubin and Summers, Larry Summers, is just continuing that forward, and it's just obscene what they're doing with the derivatives. That would be a great proposal. They also say outlaw flash trading, impose a 1% tax on all financial transactions, something Webster Tarpley's proposed. But they say these are good ideas, but not very energizing. How about we demand the revocation of corporate personhood, then decide that's too complicated too? So instead, they suggest we could demand Obama set up an American Democracy Reform Commission tasked with ending the moneyed corruption in Washington. Ending the moneyed corruption in Washington through Obama, who's a complete puppet of Wall Street. Absolute 100% puppet. George W. Bush and the rest of them really have been almost pure puppets as well. So it's just absurd. Of course, they should push for reinstating Glass-Steagall. That would go a very long way in repairing this. But let's just cut now to the Danny Panzella report and find out what he saw down on the Wall Street occupation. Do we have that clip? Yeah, while he's getting that queued up, let's just see what else is going on here.
This is Danny Panzella reporting from Wall Street with this special report for TruthSquad.tv. The New York City Police Department has locked down Wall Street in anticipation of the Occupy Wall Street protests in Lower Manhattan. There seems to be no organized structure, and some attendees refer to the group as a leaderless resistance to corporate greed and monopoly. The protest was largely organized using social networking sites like Facebook and Twitter. While police presence is heavy, the NYPD is light on artillery. There are no cops in riot gear or LRAD crowd control weapons visible on the streets of the financial district. The private Federal Reserve Bank of New York has also closed its two-story steel castle doors in preparation to keep out the barbarians at the gates. While for the most part the protesters seem to be leftists, communists, and socialists calling for an end to capitalism, there's also a contingent of libertarians, anarcho-capitalists, and volunteerists calling for an end to corporate fascism and crony capitalism.
We got some capitalists here, I can see that. We have some socialists as well.
I've noticed that the people here come from so many different backgrounds.
I'm Trotskyist, ICL-communist.
I consider myself an anti-consumerist libertarian.
Well, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. Well, above all else, I'm a voluntarist.
I'm a Christian. I believe in limited government. I believe in the Constitution.
We recognize that there is a problem, and that is corporate influence in American policymaking.
That our government isn't owned by us anymore.
Where we differ is the approaches on how to resolve that issue.
Well, we pretty much believe in a free market, but people should choose where to live and how they live.
I'm against the system. I'm against capitalism.
The main issue is corporate capitalism.
It looks like people either want to bring it down and restructure it, or bring it down altogether.
The only solution really is to bring us back to the Constitution.
I don't think that any person who wants to overturn the system should be turned away. Anyone who believes in the revolution should be part of it.
And honestly, all I see is just people that just want to change.
In the days leading up to the protest, the FBI distributed a memo to Wall Street businesses warning that the hacktivist group Anonymous would be in attendance and had threatened to shut down Wall Street networks, and that their businesses should take precautions to secure their clients' data. Undercover law enforcement peppered the crowd, dressed as the infamous Black Bloc communist group, and some wore Guy Fawkes masks, the trademark of Anonymous. They walked the crowd, observing and taking photos of activists, cataloging the groups that were in attendance. The undercovers are easily identifiable by their baggy clothes that conceal ankle holsters.
We're going to come back from that. The rest of the report is up on InfoWars. But as you can see, the important thing is that Wall Street itself and the Federal Reserve issue in particular is becoming the issue. You saw last week in the GOP debates, there was a major question on the Federal Reserve. They didn't even dare ask Ron Paul about it. The cat's out of the bag. The question is, are we actually going to hold them down and get them out of government and take our government back peacefully? We'll get more into that. We're just getting started. Guests coming up, Lou Rockwell, practically on the other side. Alex back tomorrow, Infowars.com. Now, as I was getting into before the break, and we're going to continue to bring this up with Lou Rockwell, former Ron Paul campaign manager, president of the Von Mises Institute, or the Mises Institute, and plenty of other credentials as well, and that is the Federal Reserve becoming one of the prominent issues even in the 2012 campaign. Now, as I mentioned before the break, last week on the CNN GOP debate, they did the Federal Reserve question, would you audit it, or what is your position on the Federal Reserve? And they didn't even ask Ron Paul the question. That's how afraid they were of giving him exposure. on an issue he's extremely credible on, has spent his entire career covering. And yet we have marchers in the street surrounding the New York Federal Reserve and the entire Wall Street district, really starting to put the eye of focus on that institution for the first time, the private institution, which really has our whole country in a stranglehold grip and is deeply involved with the European bailouts and all the rest of it. And, of course, QE3 also on the horizon. Now we have support for Obama slips, unease on 2012 candidates. This is in the New York Times. President Obama's support is eroding among elements of his base after a year-long effort to recapture the political center has failed to attract independent voters, according to the latest New York Times CBS News poll, leaving him vulnerable at a moment when pessimism over the country's direction is greater than at any other time since he took office. Now, I've asked the guys to try to find this poll. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find it in time for the program, but it was only a few weeks ago, and it wasn't just confidence in Obama that's slipping. It's overall confidence in the office of the presidency and of government itself. I know there's been lows like 12% approval of Congress, but you could see a chart somewhere in the mid-60s or so, maybe even 70s at some point under President Clinton, and it takes a bit of a dive with the beginning of George W. Bush's presidency, spike again for 9/11, and then from that point all the way to the end of Bush's second term, a straight drop all the way to 7% approval for what I think was the office of the presidency itself. And you could see that timed almost explicitly with the 2008 financial crash, and then the re-election, or the election rather, of Obama and a new president only sent the spike back up halfway to about 36% approval for the whole nation, of the whole office and of government itself. And that itself has eroded all the way back down towards at least 11, approaching 7. And that's with all this new financial stuff just beginning. And the point I'm trying to make is that it's a total loss of confidence. Everyone knows the woodworks are coming unglued. This financial stuff is about to sink in big time, and that's why they have the police stay ready to go. That's why they prepared for riots. That's why you've seen all these white papers and studies on how to handle the population, because things are going to come unglued. They have no intention of fixing these things. They've used the instrument of government to transfer as much power as possible to that Wall Street contingent, which is the same thing as the Council on Foreign Relations contingent, the Skull and Bones contingent, the Bilderberg contingent, and the rest of it. Now, I think that was a presidential approval poll. Of course, that's been slipping for Obama as well. But obviously, he's going to take a lot of blame for this economic disaster, as he should in some ways, for not fighting the system. But the point is, he's a puppet, and the true financial overlords have put in their people, and they're not changing these policies. In fact, as we already pointed out, QE3 is about to start. However, overtly, we don't yet know. We've also seen Ralph Nader, we covered this Friday on the InfoWars Nightly News Show, joining the left against Obama, people who think he should be challenged in a primary. Of course he should. He has no claim to the presidency. These aren't kings and dictators. We elected them, but we should send them right back out of office, and it would only bolster the real candidates. Now, we're going to get all into the Ron Paul issue, the dollar, and more with Lou Rockwell coming up on the other side of this break. There's plenty more on the show. Stay tuned. Infowars.com.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the sites, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.